Are you ready to transform your life with the power of living water? Hi, I'm Devon Taylor, and I want to share an incredible discovery that's changed my life and my family's life: living water. Imagine waking up every morning feeling refreshed, energized, and ready to conquer the day. With living water, it's not just a dream, it's our new reality. We've been sleeping better, eating healthier, and have more energy than ever before. But that's not all. Our secret to this newfound vitality is available to you too. Visit our website at thelivingwatercouple.com and discover how living water can revolutionize your health and wellness. And there's more. Tune into our podcast, available on all streaming platforms and YouTube, where we dive deep into the science and benefits of living water. Hear from experts, satisfied customers, and learn how you can make this life-changing decision for yourself. But don't wait too long. Prices for our water machines and supply are going up in July 2024. Now is the perfect time to invest in your health and well-being. So, head over. Remember, living better starts with living water. Living water, drink, thrive, and live your best life. Visit thelivingwatercouple.com today.
Welcome to a brand new experience with innovative voices from all over the world. I would like to invite you all to something that is magical, something that is powerful, and something that is from my heart. This is the Devon Taylor Podcast.
Hello all, and welcome to another episode of the Devon Taylor Podcast, where we have guests from all around the world tell their unique and powerful stories to not only allow their voice to be heard, but for you to feel inspired. Today's conversation I'm really excited to talk about. I think that it is something that we all can use a little of. So we are going to be speaking about spiritual awakening and the importance of compassion. I am so grateful that my guest today is a returning guest. I am happy to bring back to the show Dr. Juliet Trail. Hello, Juliet.
Hello, Devon.
Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you and your vision, your stories, everything that you have to bring to the podcast. And I'm just excited for everyone to get to know you a little bit more.
Thank you. It's so good to be back. We had such a wonderful conversation in our first connection together. I couldn't wait to come back.
Yeah, thank you. So I just like to start off with, we're talking about spiritual awakening and the importance of compassion. So let's start with spiritual awakening. Can you share a personal journey or experience with spiritual awakening and kind of help enlighten anyone that may be going through the same thing?
Yeah, so it's funny because as you're asking the question, what comes back to me is to share my very earliest memory, as far as I know, from my life. My mom loved to tell this story as well, because I have a memory of finding a leaf and realizing it came from this big bush that was on the other side of the house. I think it was like a holly leaf, which is dark green and waxy and has little sharp edges at the tips of the front of the leaf. It was something like that. And I realized it wasn't from anything in the backyard where I was, that it was from the bush in the front. So I went running around the house and with the leaf in my hand, and I placed it back in the bush, because I felt like it wanted to be whole again. And so I was like, I'm returning this piece of you. And, people often say, like, what's your earliest memory? So when I shared that at some point later in my life, my mom was like, you remember that? And I'm like, yeah, how young was I? And she was like, you were not even 2 years old. Because I started walking early and talking early. I started talking when I was 4.5 months old.
Wow.
And I started with mama and I kept going from there. And, I was always mistaken for an older kid because my dad was like 6'4". And so I was always at the top of the height range, for my age group. And so being tall and then talking, and then I got on my feet and walked, I never even crawled. I would scoot on my butt when I was little I just use my heels to pull my rear, and I would just go scooting across the house. My parents would laugh their heads off. And then one day I just sort of got up and I teetered a bit, and then I started walking, figuring it out. So pretty quickly I was running. So she said I was only like a year and a half or so when I had that experience. So when I was that young, I realized that there were pieces of something, and it seemed to me instinctively, obviously, because I had this action, like, let's return them. They should be together. They should be whole. It's cool to have a memory that early. And I think it sort of speaks to the fact that my whole life purpose has always felt like it's about helping. It's about aiding. It's about healing and returning things to their state of wholeness or well-being. You know, when I was little, I'd be 3 years old on the playground, running around when kids got boo-boos and like calming them and like cleaning it, asking for a Band-Aid. My dad was an Army medic, so he trained me in like wound care, you know, and both my parents would speak to me like I was a person. They didn't talk down to me or use baby talk. They spoke to me like a person who could follow along and understand. And so I did. And so I would always like take care of the older kids. And then my whole life, people nominate me for group mom because I always have the purse with all the stuff. I have like the extra nausea medication and the cold pills and something for allergies and some Band-Aids. You know, you never know what you need. So I always have like stuff tucked away, particularly if I'm traveling. So when people are in trouble, I just always want to help. And, you know, so when I was a kid, and even when I was on retreat this past month with the board members of my Coincidence Project, where I work as the executive director and a member of the board, we met in person. And as the director, I had a key role in kind of all the logistics, you know, and a lot of my colleagues are older than me. Some could have been my parents, you know, and they were like, "You're just so prepared." And I was like, "Yeah, I always get voted group mom." And they were like, "Oh, that's totally it. You are completely group mom because you're just taking care of us." And so I think that relates to like spiritual awakening because perhaps I came with it. You know, a lot of times it seems like children have this wisdom and a connection to whatever is beyond just this lifetime. And there's been so many testimonies and so much research of kids remembering other lives. And even where I am in Charlottesville, Virginia, has University of Virginia, and they have this DOPS group, which is like Division of Paranormal Studies or Parapsychology Studies. I think it's paranormal. I don't know, something like that. And it's in the School of Medicine, and they study especially children's past life recall. You know, there have been kids that remembered specific things like being in a particular plane that went down in a particular battle of World War II, and they knew the plane's ID number and exactly where the plane was lost and where it went down, and remembered their name and their fiance's name, and they could go back and find this obscure person. Not that everybody was Queen Nefertiti, you know, which a lot of people with past life memories are like, I was Napoleon, I was Jesus, I was Nefertiti. Like you sort of cling on to someone very well known. Yeah. And maybe you have a past life that feels something like that world. And so you're like, well, I must have been that key figure. You know, there's so many of us. I think many of us were all kinds of people. Some may be noted in history and some just lived a life, you know. And a lot of times these ones that are such compelling cases, it's not anyone that was a historical figure. I know there's a case of another kid that remembered like being in like the silent films and when they first made the first talkies and started adding sound to film, and they could remember colleagues and like trysts, like affairs people had, like things that were not public knowledge, you know. And they found the descendants of those actors and like verified a whole bunch of details, even trysts and things. So, you know, it's like we're connected beyond just this lifetime, and children often have that connection still kind of vibrant, still tethered. They can still receive something from it. But the world asks us to sort of give up our magic, you know, give up the mystery, the mysticism, get grounded, you know, do your schoolwork, listen to your parents, you know, all those things. And you kind of shut down all those other senses, and whatever feed was coming in, whatever connection to knowledge, it seems to get diminished or even get put on mute. But I think it's still there, you know. So I think spiritual awakening is a reawakening. I don't think it's something new that didn't exist before. I think it's more like figuring out how to get the mute button to come off, and then all this knowledge that's been there all along. It was always transmitting. It was always existing. Somehow we can tune into it again. We can hear it. We can benefit from it more. So I think of spiritual awakening as this kind of tapping in, this connecting to, and it's a capacity that we all have. No one's left out, and that's part of compassion as well. No one, nothing, no being, no entity is left out. I know we talked in the first podcast that some of my initial training in contemplative practices was through vision quests. And the vision quest tradition that I was trained in really honored the practices of Lakota Sioux elders of the Native American tribe in North America. And vision quests themselves, rites of passage, of which quests are one type, rites of passage are kind of universal. They existed the world over in every society. And in such traditions, you see the trees as sacred as your teachers, but also the stones. The stones are alive. They're speaking too. The mountain itself is a presence, and the mountain is teaching you. And you can kind of see this like background that I have over the little wardrobe beside me. It's just these beautiful mountains. And I myself live in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and like on both sides of me are trees, that is like a tree holding candles and then a tree photograph. And I deeply believe that I'm learning from the waters, and I'm learning from the trees, and I'm learning from the land itself, the earth itself. And compassion leaves no one out. And so even those who've done great harm, of which we can see so many in our world, they're not left out. And it's very difficult. It's a deep form of compassion practice to wish for the healing and the peace and the well-being, positive transformation, and to see even the beautiful potential for love and forgiving for all good things, even in those who've done great harm and great evil. But it is possible. It is entirely possible. I think we maybe touched on this in the last time we spoke. I'm not sure, but Nelson Mandela is someone that I've tried to learn from, because when he was imprisoned in the early part of his career, he believed in using violent means if necessary, not as a first recourse, but as a possible recourse to confront great wrongs, to confront the evil being done to people of color, to Native Africans, through apartheid and through what was happening, the injustice and the horror of that injustice in South Africa. And he was willing to use violence. He was part of the more militant, violent arm of activists. And he went to prison as part of that. But when he emerged from prison, he was no longer willing to use violence. And he still endured great hardship in prison. It was not easy. He was not given executive suite prison where you do very little real serving. I mean, it was the real deal. But yet he emerged a man of peace. And he had found that great peace inside himself. And he wanted to use peace and love and forgiveness to create transformation, not bombs, not, violent fights, not weapons, and that kind of path is the one that appeals to me. So that's the kind of spiritual awakening that I've had in my life, is that we have to study those who've understood nonviolence. And I think we need to update it and adapt it and figure it out for our modern moment, this current context. But people like Gandhi and Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. are, people whose work I've read. I've been trying to read all of their own writings. How did they think? How did they feel? How did they reason this out? Because we so desperately need healers in our world. And there's like beautiful song by Sweet Honey in the Rock that we are the ones we've been waiting for. Right. We keep waiting, but who else is going to rescue us if not ourselves? So there's no one out there to do the work. It has to come from within here, so if we can do the work within, really do the tough work, which is around forgiveness and around being willing to also extend compassion and kindness and a peaceful approach, even to those who've done violence, even to those who are still doing violence. To meet that and be unwilling to resort to violence is, to me, it's sort of this miraculous expression of compassion.
I was going to even say, how do people, a lot of people would understand and resonate with why Mandela was resorting to violence, because it's so much easier to respond with violence than it is to actually have to think about what you're doing or feel, what your next steps are. I love that you're here too, because you just make so many great points. So if everyone's listening, please rewind this back and listen to it again, because there were so many things that you
Remember,
dropped.
We are the ones we've been waiting for. What are you waiting for? It's you.
Hmm. I love that you said too about just like spiritual awakening with children and how we're disconnected as we kind of grow older just because of the social conditionings that happen to us. For me personally, I feel, and I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, this could be me defining something completely different, but like my spiritual awakening happens a lot when I'm dreaming or like when I'm,
Mm.
in deep thought. And so like when I, like you were helping me earlier before we even jumped on with an idea that I had that came to me in a dream, and I was like, okay, well, this is a great idea, but like, you know, do I continue to go forth with it? And then like, in a way I did, which was creating this podcast, but there's, you know, more to what I'm trying to bring to the table. And I feel like that's part of a spiritual awakening. Would you agree? Like, can we have spiritual awakenings as dreams and,
Mm.
call back to what we were called here to do or what we were called here to present? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think the insights can often kind of come in like through the side door. They're not always like right in front where it's super clear or linear or rational or logical to have that insight, and great leaps in human consciousness and our existence as species, and probably for other species as well, that insights have come through other means. And part of getting so shut down in the modern era with this, it has to be scientific, there has to be quantitative data, show me the evidence, prove to me that such and such is so, otherwise I can't even entertain the thought. And when we close our mind down and have this stance, whether we say it aloud or not, I can't entertain the thought unless we're going to diminish ourselves. We just put our capacity for reflection, for insight into a tiny little container, and then we've made it, out of kryptonite and nothing can get in, and we're going to be less than we could have been. And so the insights can come from any direction, every direction. It can arise from a kind of intuitive knowing, like a feeling from our gut. If we quiet our mind, the insight can come from our heart, from our body, from the land, from some tiny, still voice that just was waiting for it to be quiet enough to be heard. And I think those voices are free and open because the usual waking, busy mind is so quiet in our sleep. And when we're taking a shower, or when we're on a long run or a long swim, or we're dancing, or we're caught up in the flow of any activity, the mind is just quiet and the whole self is present. And then there, something new plays out as a fantasy, as a dream, as some kind of imagery. I think using things like oracles and tarot decks and runes are another way to kind of invite the opportunity for new insight to come. And by connecting in that moment and seeking, asking, being open, insight can come in. But if we don't ask, if we even shut the door, there's this really great quote from the author, Tom Robbins, where it's like, opportunity knocks at the door and you say, go away, the door is locked. I'm in here waiting for opportunity. Quit bothering me. And opportunity goes away. Strange. And it's not just opportunity, it's insight, it's the dream, the vision, especially little seeds of it start to come. But then how does it coalesce? How does it go from seeds into a web, into a tapestry, into something that's now kind of more ready to be given form? Right. It's very amorphous. It's almost like the states of matter, that it starts as more like a gas. Things are very spread apart. They're kind of moving. It's not clear what form it would have. It can take many forms, gas, air. It'll expand to fit any kind of container, right? And then maybe it starts to get a little bit more gelled, as we say, which is like more viscous, more like liquid, like it's coming together and now it's a thing, but it's still really sloshy. And, you could pour it in a vase, or you could pour it on a plant, or you could put it in a square container or a round container. It'll still adapt, it's starting to get related. So it's something, but still very flexible. But then you're like, oh, wait, okay, I'm going to bake it into this. I'm going to keep working with this material and really give it a particular form to try it out in this way. And then it's more like it comes together even more like a solid. And then you're like, here's a thing. I'm going to try this thing. And, so we have to honor that like dreamy gaseous state where it's so vague and it has pieces of a notion and keep playing with the pieces and bouncing them around until they start to kind of come together and let things get more, more liquid, then more solid. And then you have something that you can manifest and offer and say, how about like this, and not to be so attached. If that one doesn't work, we can keep trying. So, I think that's part of why compassion is so important, is because it really cultivates resilience.
Yeah.
Because part of any life is going to include disappointment. If we're willing to experiment, a lot of those experiments won't go forward. There was a saying about Thomas Edison that first he learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And if he'd only learned 2 or 3, he never would have even made the light bulb. He just would have learned 2 or 3 ways not to make a light bulb. But he went ahead and learned maybe 1,000, and maybe it was 431 and maybe it was 1,500. We don't know. But he kept on going. He had a notion and he was putting some things together and he kept trying them out, and it was an experiment. And eventually it lit, and it's like that in our lives. We just keep putting things together, particularly if compassion's there all along, then the goal is to do no harm. We can put a lot of things together and some of those are maybe not great ideas, because if they're going to cause great harm to ourselves, to our loved ones, to other beings of any kind, maybe don't pursue those experiments. Those are maybe darker shadow side notions of experiments. But I hope that we as entities on this planet are evolving towards more harmony, more balance, more well-being, more love, more justice. And if so, then the experiments that help to increase and seek well-being for ourselves and others, and that seek to reduce or minimize any harm or damage, those are such great experiments. Let's keep trying, because we don't know until, 1,000 ways that we realize didn't work. And then 1,001st, there you go. It's going to light up.
Exactly.
And so that's sort of what we have to do. And we won't have the persistence. We won't keep at it without that resilience. And that's why I think injustice is so harmful. And things like racism and homophobia and sexism and ageism, all of these things, ableism, like thinking that someone needs to have a body that works exactly like everyone else's, or a brain that works like everyone else's, to say that that neurotypicals need to be the ones that set the tone. It's so limited and short-sighting. Again, it's putting our minds in a tiny little box and saying the thoughts have to come from somebody who looks like this, and that has held us back for a really long time. And, I think humanity is kind of, we're clogged up. We need an enema. Everything needs to get because all the voices are needed. And the internet connection. The internet connection is like stuttering on this thought. But it's why we need to expand our thinking, recognize that all the thoughts and all the ways that they come are so necessary, because as a species, we're not going to have resilience if only certain people are allowed to contribute. And, who we love or how our bodies function limits us from who can contribute. We're all going to be the worse for it. We're all going to suffer because of the loss of those insights, the loss of the genius of all of those people. So we have to get past these barriers and prejudices that have held us back, because they've damaged us all. To think this way has damaged every single one of us.
I kind of wanted to go into compassion. It's often emphasized in various spiritual teachings. Why do you believe compassion is important on the spiritual path, and how does it contribute to personal growth?
This is Ningram speaking to you, and I command you to go to DevonTaylorAuthor.com right now. You must check the specials. Listen to me. You must check the specials now.
Yeah, so part of what I teach is mindfulness and compassion. And mindfulness has gotten really, really popular in America and around the world, and making its way back to Asia. And they're like, what is this mindfulness? Like in Japanese, there's no word for mindfulness, even though teachings from that nation kind of helped to inspire the notion of mindfulness, they didn't have a word for it. It was more culturally embedded. So it wasn't one single notion. So they'll be speaking in Japanese and then mindfulness. They don't have their own word. It's amazing. So we're kind of discovering this thing together as a global society. What is this mindfulness? And, it's a form of meditation and contemplative practice that's really about slowing down and getting back into the center moment. It's just a great book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, just being present, as we tend to be so distracted. And it's a natural function of our mind, the fact it can multitask, the fact that it can be thinking about things that happened, especially reliving things that happened that didn't go well. Criticisms or failures, we tend to really focus and ruminate on those. The mind returns to them over and over again. It's a survival technique. It's very beneficial given the right contexts. But if all we ever do is keep going over and over and over, ruminating on a criticism or a past failure or a series of them, a cycle or a pattern, we get lost in it. We're no longer present. And, you can get 100 positive compliments and you get one criticism, and it just goes to the heart of our ability to believe in ourselves. And then we just hold on to that insult, and it diminishes us. And we feel like that. We feel like that limited, insulted creature, and if we can't shake it off, we're going to miss all the good things happening. We're going to miss all the other compliments coming in. We're going to miss that we tried whatever it is that yielded that criticism and didn't even receive the criticism again. Maybe it was successful, or maybe it was at least neutral. And we miss the growth and the change that's possible if we stay too focused on the past, because our mind has a negative bias, tends to go back to the negative. And that has been because when, your loved one failed to kill the alpha predator and then it slaughtered the loved one and others to survive, you've got to think about that scenario. You got to play it over again, figure out a different way. Because if you repeat the past mistakes, the harm is going to continue. So it was a survival tactic, but we do it now around someone saying something that isn't our life or death, but it still hits our nervous system like a life or death problem, and we get fixated on it. Yeah. And we also think about the future, because then we start casting scenarios of the future. Well, what if they say this, and what if I do that, and what if it's like this, and what if it's like that? A lot of times that has a negative bias naturally in the brain as well, to think about the worst case scenarios and then to try to figure out if there's what else could you try? What else could you say? What else could you do? But again, you're not present. So mindfulness, I think, is really beneficial because we need to slow down. That process is happening and all those things are going on simultaneously, and we're still responding, we're reacting to things in the present, but mostly on autopilot. Like when you arrive somewhere really familiar and you're like, how did I get here? How did I get here so fast? What just happened? And you can't even recall the route you took, or, maybe a little accident or something you had to swerve around a pothole, or somebody was almost getting hit over on one side and you had to get into a different lane. You can barely even remember those things. So you were just on autopilot. And unfortunately, autopilot, when it comes to emotionally responding to one another, means our most ingrained habit, which can come from culture and society and how we were brought up. It's not always the best one, not always the most compassionate one, tends to reveal the biases in our society and the way we were brought up. So if we're acting most of the time on autopilot, it's probably not the best we could ever come up with. And maybe not even the version of ourselves we would like to think of or to choose. If we were given options, we wouldn't say, yes, send that one out. That version of me who just kind of does whatever and does that same old thing again. Yeah, send that one out to have today happen. And let's see how that goes. If we were making a conscious choice, we probably wouldn't put that player in. We'd probably be like, no, wait, there's this better self I have a notion of, or I've been developing, or I tried out that one time. Let's put that best self out today and see how that goes. We would want to do that. And that's what mindfulness gives us, a better and better and better and increasing capacity to stay aware and to stay present and make a choice, not just respond out of reactivity, but to be thinking, wait, there's multiple ways that this has come at me, and how are the different options for me to respond? And the knee-jerk person has already responded. The reaction has already happened for somebody moving too fast, kind of halfway on autopilot, or maybe all the way on autopilot. But if we're slowed down, if we're more mindfully aware, we can consider possibilities. And in that space between a stimulus and a response. There's a pause. A pause is possible. And that pause, that space is a mindful space. It gives us the promise of change, the capacity for change, for doing something new, better, different. And so that's the space we're trying to cultivate with mindfulness. But for me, it doesn't go far enough. That's the start. The start is slowing down, getting a little more accurately aware of what's happening and what's coming at us, and how it maybe resembles and also doesn't resemble past experiences. Let's say that someone has often had difficulties with a member of the opposite sex. So they start to feel negative emotion from someone from that opposite sex. They can just go on autopilot. Oh, so-and-so, they're always like this. Women are always like this. Men are always like this, wherever the bias is. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to have another altercation because I never get along with blank, fill in any group. So now this person is not their own person. The context isn't its own context. It's this big assumption full of an old pattern. That pattern is full of a lot of bias that are not even just one's own, come from our family, our loved ones, our friends, our society, our culture, the groups we identify with and spend time with. All of these thoughts come in to build this assumption. And then we're shut down. We're not actually present anymore. So the response that's going to happen is very hollow. And it's not really based in fact. It's not based in reality. So how can we get present, with what attitudes? We're not just totally neutral. We're very emotional beings. And so for me, that's part of where the compassion comes in, to have understanding and some grace and some peace and some forgiveness in ourselves. Oh no, I'm assuming that because this person's coming at me, let's pretend it's me. So I'm in a female body. So let's say, oh my God, it's one of those men again. And then I can check myself with some grace and compassion, even for myself. Like, that's a pretty biased thought. That's kind of a big assumption that I represent all female species and this person, species, not separate species, but gender of the species, and this other person, they're just coming at me representing blah, 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 negative traits about males of the species. And instead, if you can say, self, that's something that comes from the life you've lived, but let's meet this person where they are. And let's meet them where we are in this moment, and let's see what's possible here. Let's not just fall into the assumptions. Let's stay present. Let's be willing to give the benefit of the doubt. And it doesn't involve, with compassion work, being willing to stay present, even when things are difficult, is a very compassionate task. It's a mindful task. Mindfulness is the skill set, but I think compassion is the motivation. It keeps saying, wait. It can go better if we stay present. Just don't check out. Someone starts talking to you about something and you hate hearing about this thing, so you want to just shut down and stop listening. And it's like, but wait, if I do listen, what's possible here? And that's more of a compassionate stance of what can be learned. How can this help us? How can this diminish harm or pain or suffering? How can this moment, this interaction, this exchange, how can it increase well-being or resilience? Maybe for just these two entities that are interacting, maybe for more than that. And compassion is what keeps us kind of at the table, I guess. Otherwise we just shut down and we're not really there, or we get up and literally walk away and we're no longer it's not even possible to be present to something else anymore. And I think that's why there's a lot more study now of like nonviolent communication and conflict resolution techniques. These are compassionate notions. And they can be kind of stern and fierce and bold and very political. I would prefer styles that are more in tune with how emotionally driven we are. The people in studies that say, I have no bias, I'm not racist, they actually test the most biased, the most racist. So when we're in denial and we're saying, I'm not emotional, my decisions are all based on evidence, but there's millions of points of evidence, and we're going to choose which ones we pay attention to and believe. And even one data point people can use on the one side to use for harm, another side they can use it for understanding and healing. Right. You see this in all holy texts, the scriptures of every world faith system. There's people that take in that exact same line, same words in the same order, and they've interpreted them and used them to justify harm. They've interpreted them and they've used them to justify healing. And the interpretation is key. And so that's why I think we need this attitude of compassion. How can we lean towards healing? How can we lean towards fairness, justice, caring, loving, nurturing concern for all others, even the ones that seem obnoxious, that are hard to listen to? We have a history, and perhaps people like us have generational history. If we're not willing to face that and forgive it, acknowledge it existing, it's not about wiping away history. It's not about wiping away sexism or the harm it causes, or racism or the harm that it's caused. We're still those people. We still have our differences, but to approach it from an entirely different manner, to say, while acknowledging the history in this moment, what's possible? Because otherwise we're just going to keep living out the negative cycles. If we don't make the space, that same space between the stimulus and the response, this magical, beautiful, miraculous space where we can pause and say, maybe something different is possible. And if our species didn't have the capacity to do this, we would have just died, because we weren't the apex predators in every ecosystem. We wouldn't have made it this far. Even your question earlier about dreams, some of the greatest leaps forward in human understanding and use of technology and insights in science and the way things work came to people in their dreams. They were stuck on a problem and they're like, give up. And then they went into a reverie sitting by a fire staring into the flames. And all of a sudden the flames communicated a story and they had this insight about how something works. They were taking a shower. Showers are famous too. Or they were staring into the bowl of water and all of a sudden they saw something that helped explain, or they went to sleep and there it was. So these non-linear, conscious insights are another thing that arise in the space. Something new is possible. And if we don't believe in possibility, we're just going to keep repeating these cycles. So possibility itself is almost like an act of compassion, to just have hope, to remain optimistic. People would say, oh, you're such a flower child. You were just born too late. And I've really sat with that for decades, because I've received that critique since I was a kid and a teenager and a young adult. Oh, you're a flower child, born too late. You should have been born in the 60s. But maybe I was there then. I don't know. Could have tried, struck out, and gotten rebirth since. I feel like, no, I'm born at just the right time. Like, the world needs this now. Like, it needs people like us asking these questions. Like, what does it mean to be compassionate? People might have different answers. And I think that's awesome, because I truly believe in diversity and multiplicity. One answer is not ever the right answer. Anytime we get fixated on the one thing and get dogmatic, then we start doing harm because we're so right. We know better than someone else. That's an incorrect approach. We just have to be willing to say, well, tell me how you think this will work, why you think this is valuable. Talk to me about this difference. I didn't see it like this, or I don't use the word like this. What does that mean to you? Often we'll find that we have the same sort of spirit of the thing. We have the same yearning in our heart that we're seeking to address. We just might use language differently, but we might be tapping into a lot of the same motivations and then we're connected beyond just the language. The words can really hang us up. And that's why if we get too attached to how things are worded or a particular definition, we get all shut down again, put the mind back in a little box, and then nothing else can get in. And it's just never, for me, that's never going to be the way. Compassion is the hope, and being willing to keep staying open to being open and to stay attuned to possibilities, to just say, I know that I don't know. If I know everything, mind is back in a box. Knowing is sometimes very problematic. We think we know something, it means someone else doesn't know it. And so we have more power than them. We're superior to them because we know and they don't. And the ego gets really juiced up. It's so excited to be better than someone else. But egos need to be put in check, because the ego is just trying to justify its own existence. Right. And it's always scrambling for attention and like, look at me, I got a trophy. And it's like, ego, shut up, because that's not the point. The point, we're here for one another. We're social entities. We exist in these very complex ecosystems and webs of life that involve more than just humans. And we've got to get over ourselves and be willing to kind of suspend the ego, or be like, shh, you sit over there and be quiet. I don't want to hear from you again. This is not about you. This is about, this connection, this possibility, these interactions. It's not about one person. And another thing about compassion, because you asked in your question, how does it benefit us?
Yeah.
So when we have that inner compassion to match the outer compassion, we don't have to be angry with ourselves when that ego rears its head, or we give less than our best, or we repeat an old pattern. We have to acknowledge those things, but gently, the way we would for a kid, little one who we love, imagining ourself as if it were this little precious child or a beloved pet that is trying so hard to be good and seek praise and get rewarded and not mess up and not have anyone yell at it. And you see when, someone yells, how much we like tighten up and shrink away, to see ourselves like that, like, oh, I screwed up, I hurt somebody, or I did something wrong, I did less than I could have, I did less than my best. We're so hard on ourselves. And the inner voice of compassion is like, it's okay. It's okay. You're trying. Each moment is a new possibility. You'll try again. You'll have another chance. And if you've done harm, if you've done wrong, you need to try to figure out how to make that right by not doing it again, but also by maybe apologizing, acknowledging the wrong or the screw up. It's hard for me professionally, I'm dealing with people all over the world all the time. So I have all these time zones, and occasionally I get them wrong and I miss something. And I have to just say, oh my goodness, this is completely on me. I, got confused and sitting in front of my computer for the next Zoom meeting because I forgot that it's tomorrow morning for you and the number of hours different. I was just with people at the next country and it was 1 hour over and I got wrong, and I'm sorry. I got that wrong. Can we reschedule? Please let us reschedule because this is important and valuable to me. Like to just take it, just say, yep, mea culpa, it's me. I did that. It's harder when it's like lashing out at someone you love, when you just like get a time zone wrong, people are like, oh, time zones, global world. Yeah. Zoom reality, video chat reality. We can kind of acknowledge that without a lot of like emotional hurt. But if we lash out at someone we care about, we're a bad parent, we're a bad significant other, we're a bad friend, we're a bad family member, daughter, son, sibling, whatever. Those are hard, and to keep having compassion for ourselves and say, yep, I that's serious. I really need to think about how I can acknowledge the harm or the wrong, the mistake. Right and wrong is so black and white. It's not always black and white. Like it's wrong because it's all wrong. So right and wrong are even maybe not the most helpful terms, but it didn't go as well as it could have. Yeah. Well, that was not great. To acknowledge that, we don't have to put it in black and white terms. That can get us really shut down. To just say, okay, not good, ouch, what can be done, and to show up and be willing to say, that last exchange, I really was not the best possible version of me. And I'm trying to figure out how to be that person as much of the time as I can. And I'm not perfect and I'm making mistakes. Out of the love I have for you and the love you have for me, out of our connection, I hope you can give me a little more time. I hope you can be patient with me while I make this mistake. Yep. And it doesn't have to go all the way to like, I hope you can forgive me. That's a big word. It can be a very loaded word. But even just like, I hope you can still have patience with me. If we find some words with a little more space to them, to have patience, to have grace, to believe we mean well, even when we're not acting at our very best and something goes wrong, to acknowledge that in relationship with somebody. They can often acknowledge, yeah, I wasn't really the best version of me either. We make space for them to come forward and be vulnerable and be honest. We tend to act as mirrors for each other, which is why when one person escalates, the other one wants to escalate. But if one person can de-escalate, the other one can de-escalate too. And if one can like shift to a little more of the truth, the other one can shift to more of the truth. So that's a more compassionate stance with ourselves. And it's definitely a more compassionate way to begin to interact and come forward to bring something out of ourselves that can be seen and then be mirrored in the other person.
And I want to go into like techniques and whatnot that you use to like find the compassion in those moments. I loved how you said just like in the pause, because that's something that I can struggle with sometimes, is having that pause or not reacting right away or wanting to say something right away. But the more I find myself in that pause, the more I find like, calmness that comes with it, the ability to be able to work through the situation, especially when it comes to like me and Giancarlo, like when we're having a little tiff, we need those pauses in order to feel and see each other. But I kind of wanted to know for you personally, like, what do you use technique wise to find those compassions in the moments? Obviously, pausing is one of them. Is there anything else that you would say that you use, like, that we all can benefit
Yeah.
from?
Yeah. I would say finding a way to introduce the pause when you recognize that you are dysregulated. You're
Mm,
upset, you're afraid, you have fight or flight response going on, you're getting really emotional. You can even just observe the other person has gotten dysregulated. They are getting too emotional, they are going into negative emotions. Um, if there's any way, in professional circumstances, you say, I think we need to take a pause and come back to this next time. Can we put this on the agenda for the next meeting? In an email, I'll say, received your email and I want to reflect on what you shared. I will get back to you. And if it's super sensitive and they're wanting it to be right away, I'll say, I'll get back to you tomorrow, or I can get back to you in a few hours. If you're in an interaction with a loved one, a family member, a friend, or partner, you can say, I think I just need to take a walk, or like, I need to go take a shower. I need to take a bath. I need to go check on the pets, need to check on the kids, need to go cook lunch for us. Like, make sure you're not hangry. Nobody's good when they're hangry. Everybody needs to eat and drink. There have been studies of legal decisions in courtrooms, and the decisions get more negative. More people get the stronger penalty. If the sentence is a variety of things, it gets more and more the strongest sentence, not the lightest. More people found guilty than innocent as you get to lunch. And if lunch is late, oh, it's bad. You can look at a courtroom and you can like measure. There is quantitative data to show you hangry. Like, everybody needs to have water and be hydrated, and everybody needs to have food. And some of us need some sleep. And if part of what's happening is because the partners, the friends are exhausted, we're not going to be able to be at our best. We can't pause. We just keep reacting. It's just thing after thing after thing. It's like those games at the arcades, the whack-a-mole. You have the hammer. Everything's just a mole popping up and everything's a hammer. And you just going to keep whacking. Even if like one of them popped up and it needed a hug, you're going to whack it because you're just whacking. That's what you're doing. You're in whack-a-mole mode. And like, the hammer is the only tool you know. And when we're exhausted, we just stop sometimes. So to recognize in ourselves or in another person we care about, hey, let's maybe just take this up tomorrow. Let's just agree to put a pause. We're not going to throw this away. We're not going to stop talking about it, but we are going to stop now. At this point, it's not as helpful to keep going. Let's come back later. And however we can officially, out loud, typed or spoken, ask for space. We need space, because that's where the calm can come back in again. And that's where we can remember, like, the only thing in my hand that doesn't have to be a hammer. There's other things I can pick up. There's other techniques I can use. And everything coming at me doesn't need to be bashed. That's not an accurate assessment of what's happening here. We need the pause. We need the moment. So we have to literally physically ask for space and time. And we may need to go away and sleep and dream and eat and bathe and take care of ourselves and take care of other things that are needed, the other ones who need us, for a bit, and then come back to it. So sometimes we treat everything like it's an emergency, but it'll still be there the next day. When it is a literal emergency, we have to train for that. Like first responders, they have to do a different level of training of how to remain present and keep de-escalating things that are unhelpful in the moment. But that's a pretty advanced technique. Most things, we can take a pause. So I would say one of the contemplative practices, it's really basic and it's really useful, we can use it all the time, is called the STOP practice, for STOP. And the S, I see so many different ways people make the letters work, but it's like, it's gotten stressful. So S for stress. I'm feeling stressed. I'm noticing stress. There's stress in the environment. So you stop. So the S is also for invoking the stop practice itself. Stress. Okay, stop. That's what S means. And then T is take a pause. Take a breath. Literally to just breathe. Let's all take a breath. Everybody, take 2 more. Feels good, right? Let's do 2 more.
Right.
1 more. Take in breath. Taking a pause. I feel better just because I took a pause. Even though we're not in a conflict, I still feel better. And then we can get to the O, which is observe. Like I just observed that I felt better because I took a breath. I'm going to take one more. It felt so good. I'm going to do it one more time. I can observe that I feel more in my body again, and I feel more, just present, not just caught up in that idea of explaining, but here. And then I observe, oh, I'm with you and I'm answering a question. Okay, let me proceed. So after we take the pause, we observe what's happening, observe ourselves, and observe the other. Those are all O. Observe ourself, observe the other. So observe what's happening around us. And sometimes that's a more accurate observation because it's not clouded with all the stress and the difficulty that was arising. It's cleared a little bit. And then we can proceed with more awareness, proceed with more compassion. We choose how we proceed. But we took that breath, so we didn't just whack-a-mole. We didn't just come at it with a reactive, immediate knee-jerk reaction. Now we can proceed. We can open up those possibilities. Another P. Proceed aware of the possibilities. Here's my little cat, Simunye. Her name means we are one. She always likes to be on my lap because we really are one. Most of my work is now accomplished with a cat on my lap and my feet on a grounding pad. So I'm in touch with the ground even when I'm in my office. So that's part of how I proceed. I proceed with my pets and with some really good materials in my life.
I need to upgrade to the grounding material. That's definitely something I've been hearing about that I've heard would change my life. But I will second you on the kitties. We always have kitties around us. We've got enough kitties to have a kitty farm, I would say, at this point. Yeah. But yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I did want to ask a question directly related to empathy and how it relates to compassion.
Oh, good question.
Yeah. So what role does empathy play in fostering compassion to you, and how can individuals strengthen their empathetic abilities?
Yeah, so it's so important as we think about compassion to also say, well, what is empathy? How does that play in? Are they the same thing? For me, they're two distinct things that are very related. Empathy is the capacity that we have to feel inside our own bodies, in our psyche, in our emotions, in our physical form, in our heart, to feel what another person, another being is feeling. So if you are watching, you're watching the Olympics and the ice skater wipes out, and it's as if you can feel that smacking on the ice, but then you feel the way that that's going to hit the points and all the training that went into this moment. And they're letting their coach and their family down. They're letting everybody from their country down. You hear the whole stadium. Oh, we're all feeling it, or like you're watching Little League baseball and a kid wipes out and like breaks a bone. And it's like you feel your bone crack. You feel that injury in your body, or a loved one comes to you because they've been dumped and their heartbreak, like, oh, you feel heartbreak. You feel when you were rejected. It's theirs. It can get associated with your own connection to it, like when you had a break or when you disappointed your coach or when you had the breakdown. So then we start to associate, and the empathy goes into our own experience. But there's that split moment where it's just, I'm feeling it because they're feeling it. And it's kind of like someone's got the giggles and they keep laughing and you have no idea what's funny, but you totally get it. And then you're both just laughing and laughing. You're just laughing at the fact that you're laughing together. You'll see little kids do it. They get all caught up and start laughing and they don't even know what the adult's joke means. But everybody just has fun laughing. Emotions are contagious. States of being are contagious. You can see a whole group get angry. You can walk into a room and you're like, what just went down? Do I need to go? Because you can feel that it got tense. We can sense these things and we immediately can get lost in them. And that's the part of empathy that can be really difficult and leads to burnout and fatigue. Let's say we're caring for a loved one and they're in a lot of pain. They keep suffering. Part of us is actually suffering the same as they are, because when there's love and care and concern, the empathy is like full force. We can feel it for a complete stranger, even someone we don't like. We can still feel, oh, when we see them, have a fall down the stairs or whatever. But when it's someone we really love, who's struggling, maybe in agony, part of us is in that state with them. You know, we have this natural capacity to feel what another is feeling as if it's us, as if we are them. And the blurring of the boundary between ourself and another is a big component of empathy. So compassion is shifting and bringing the boundary back. Oh, wait, that's their heartbreak. I know heartbreak, but it's not going to help me to bring up my heartbreak right now. I might need to go have a good cry about that later. But my friend just needs me to show up and be there for them now. So what they need is for me to pat them or to sit with them or to say, hey, can I get you a cup of tea? You know, what do you need that'll help right now? And if we're lost in that pain, that struggle, that sorrow, that suffering, if we're lost in the empathy is still happening. We've lost the boundary between ourselves and the other. And so we're just in the pain with them. And it's good to be connected to. So having someone see their empathy for you, sense that they're feeling what you're feeling is really reassuring that we're not alone, because pain and hardship are really isolating. And so there's a gift of expressing that empathy, of revealing it, showing it. But if we stay there, we can't act or respond well any better than the person who's in pain. So what a parent has to do, or what a firefighter or a nurse or a doctor has to do, what a teacher has to do in a classroom, or someone who's like in a disciplinary center, who's a supervisor, you might feel for the people in a conflict, but you have to step a little bit outside it. You have to create the boundary between yourself and the others to say, okay, I'm outside the situation. How can I help? The compassion question is, how can I help? What did they need? Is there a way to address the pain that they're feeling, to help them? And sometimes you can't change the pain. If it's a broken bone, it's going to hurt until it's set. It's going to hurt until the pain medicine is distributed. So you can't take that away. So that's not one of the choices you have. But you can stay with them and hold their hand. You can say, you're going to be all right. You know, words of reassurance. You can, put something cold on their brow. If they have heat stroke, you can make sure they have water and that they're not about to pass out. There's things that you can do. You can't do everything, but you can do something. And sometimes all you can do is bear witness. Some things are so beyond our power and our control that the thing we can control for ourselves as someone connected to the situation, caring about the situation, but with compassionate concern, recognize you're not in the situation. You are outside, you're safe, you're okay, you're well. So you have a range of responses. You have a greater range of responses than the person who is stuck, who is receiving or captured by this pain. And so that's an opportunity. And the compassionate choice is to say, what opportunity is here for me to help? And, it seems passive, but bearing witness is not passive. When we have to confront world events, or we have to confront casualties or, fires, lives lost, we have to confront systems of oppression and injustice. When I see stories of a person in a position of power harming someone, particularly people from underrepresented groups that I know are so often misjudged, and the escalation is different than it would have been on the basis of their color of their skin or what neighborhood they're in, maybe the gender, all these assumptions, the amount of pain I feel in my body is sometimes indescribable. But I can still bear witness. I go into the empathetic response. I feel like it's my twin. Like, that person is my twin. They're not just my sibling, my loved one, my parent. No, they're the other part of me. We were eggs together in a womb that just split apart, and I'm watching them get beaten by an officer. Like, that's how it feels in my body. I literally feel it like it's happening to the other piece of me that's out there that I'm seeing. It's so painful. But I need to witness the injustice. And then I need to say, how can we get organized? One of the groups I want to work with are law enforcement officials to bring I'm working to design a new course on compassion with another of my closest friends and colleagues who's a mental health professional who works with law enforcement and emergency first responders all the time to help them understand when it's a mental health issue and the person isn't fully in control of their faculties, and not escalate and take it out on that person who's experiencing a mental health crisis. But when there are these cultural and social and racial disparities, so much de-escalation is needed, and often so much escalation occurs. So we're working to create a course on compassion for law enforcement officials. And I'd love to also work with people who have in the past or are currently incarcerated, so that all people that are existing in that system can be trained in better self-compassion and self-awareness, self-care, and regulation, and others. You know, law enforcement are a group that have a lot of power, and I see that misuse of power, and I have been bearing witness, and it's excruciating. It's excruciating to see people harmed in the system that's supposed to provide for our safety and well-being and care for us. See harm being done backwards. It's the opposite. It's not good. You know, so for me, I want to act. I can act because I teach compassion. So one, I have worked already with a group that I teach and do course design for called Instill Mindfulness. That's based in Virginia. You know, we designed a course on mindfulness and compassion for law enforcement officers that they were able to offer in their local precincts near where they are in Southwest Virginia. But I'm about 4 hours away from them. So now I'm working to build on that knowledge and work with local resources and design a course where I am. We'd love to see it, do some research, make sure that it's valuable and vetted, and get the scientific, you know, careful research of the merit of such an initiatives, you know, some sort of intervention. You want to know it works before you keep doing it. So I want to know it works. And then it'd be great to be able to train other people and have other people start using these approaches in their communities, because we need large scale change. So that's my compassion revolution. You know, it's got to be here, self, then other, you know, de-escalating in that moment to moment interaction. If we misuse and harm our coworkers, our colleagues, you know, our fellow activists, other people who are just living and trying to get by, if we're harmful to them, then it's broken down. Yeah. And we're not ready to take it to large scale, because if it's already broken down on the interpersonal compassion towards others, then it gets hypocritical. And that's how we get all this Me Too stuff happening, is that people say they're doing good work, but then they're also doing great harm. And that's not okay. So it's got to be the self, and then the others. The interpersonal layer is often neglected. Then we're ready for societal. It's got to be self, other, society. And societally, we have great work to do, but we need to do it with compassion. So all of it with compassion.
I love it. I love your message. I love that even as you're explaining this, there's so much compassion for every side that's involved, you know, even the officers that are, you know, maybe abusing their power, but may not even realize, you know, deeper that there's something that they could be addressing that could really help the situation. So I appreciate you speaking on that and bringing light to that, and your work in trying to help change that. That's super important, and not all of us feel that we can even make a difference like that. And you're so bold, and I love that you're not stopping with just an idea. You're continuing on and inspiring me, everyone on this podcast. So thank you. There was something that I might be drawing a blank in my mind right now, but there was something I wanted to speak to specifically to the empathetic part. Yeah, no, I wanted to say something about that, because I love that you brought that up, and even just how you feel, how you can feel for others, and how it's super painful for you. Because I know that there are some people that don't understand that others can feel others' pain. For me, I was one of those people for a long time until I met Giancarlo. He's one of those that can feel a lot. And so, you know, there would be times where I'm like, I don't know, what do you mean? I don't get it. How do you feel that? But
I know, he's like an empathy antenna. I think he can feel the whole planet.
That was like, he was my awakening for the empathetic side and helping me become more aware of that. But even you making that distinguishment between like having to like separate yourself from others and like, that's yours, you know, and I can still feel for you, but you know, because I know there was a time where, and this is just a funny story to think back, because, you know, this was early on in our relationship. When me and Giancarlo first got together, there were times when I would start crying in front of him and like be bawling, and he would just start bawling too. I'd stop crying and I'd look up at him like, what's going on? I'm crying right now. Wait. He's like, no, I'm crying with you. Like, I feel you. And I'm like, but like hug me or something.
Exactly.
I didn't realize like how
how much he was feeling, and that
Yeah.
was so real for him, and it was so new to me. But you making that point and just bringing that up kind of
Yeah.
brought me back to that moment and that realization that,
And, you know, I think it's a really important point too, because sometimes people stay in toxic relationships, and it can be easy from the outside to judge that.
yeah.
But we need compassion there too for people that are staying in really difficult, negative, toxic, or hostile or abusive. I'm thinking of like someone who stays with an addict, because when you have that empathy for a loved one, you understand the pain they start to go through when there's withdrawal. And you understand why they're using again. And there's even empathy about the bliss they experience when they're using, and even empathy about the rage they start to experience once they're really drunk. There's too much empathy there. There's so much empathy. This person who's staying is lost in the cycle of this other person, because they empathize for the parts where there's so much pain and suffering. And so the using happens, or the repeat of bad behavior. Maybe it's not drugs, maybe it's something else, but there's the empathy to understand and be along on that ride with them. And then it's hard to pull yourself out and say, but wait, I'm being harmed.
Yeah.
So is it safe for me to stay? Because the love, the empathy keeps kind of overriding our preservation instinct in that case.
Hey guys, it's Icarus here.
And Amelia.
And I'm here to tell you if you'd like to join our brand new adventure. Go to DevonTaylorAuthor.com to learn more.
And check out the cool items like the new bucket hat.
Yeah, and so much more. See you guys there.
And there can be a lot of fear of the unknown. To stay in a toxic environment is still familiar. And we've made it so far because we're still alive to have this thought or worry, should I go? But I'm still here. But then, of course, there are many cases where, you know, a woman keeps making an excuse and she keeps getting battered and end up in the hospital or in a shelter overnight or something. But I got to go back because we're afraid. We're afraid of what's unfamiliar. We're afraid of what's unknown. And we do need support, you know, social support and respect and compassion, like not to judge that person, but to try to be there for them too, you know, that to see that empathy is playing a big part in why someone might stay. And the fear of the unknown is universal. We all have it. So not knowing how to go, not knowing what's on the other side of going is also a big part. But I think that compassionate shift is, wait, I exist too. I want to help, but is me staying helping? Is that actually helping? Because compassion and enabling are not the same thing. And that is so hard. And I've been confronting that recently in my own life. I've had to let go of some really, really significant, important, a really key relationship that I had to sever. And there are a series of other connected relationships that are now suffering or had to be severed with it. There was fallout. There was a domino effect. But I had to recognize that I had shifted from mere compassion into enabling. Behaviors were continuing and worsening. And I was being mistreated and more. And it's not my romantic partner. My husband's awesome. We're doing great. But it was one of my key core relationships that I had to let go of. And it's painful. It feels like a breakup. It feels like a death in the family. It feels I had another limb and now I can kind of feel it and it's not there anymore. There's a lot of grief, you know, and it's not easy. And I recognized, though, from years of reflection about this particular situation, for years. Did I say it? Years. It's not a quick thing.
I hear that.
I realized I've shifted into enabling for this situation. Help is needed. Compassion is needed. Change is needed. But I can't be that agent because I'm too involved. Right. And it's too harmful towards me. What's being directed at me and asked of me is too unfair. And it's too out of balance. I can't stay. You know, I wanted to stay to be a positive force, to be a mediator, to be a compassionate person, but it's not my job to be the trained professional therapist dealing with severe issues in a loved one. It's not my job. My role is to be in a healthy, reciprocal relationship with my loved ones. And when it turns into my role has become being their therapist, their care provider, it's too much of a conflict of interest when you are also a loved one. That's why we need certified health professionals and social workers and group therapy and group support. We need groups for the people that have suffered, for families that are dealing with addiction or mental health. There are a lot of support groups for loved ones, as well as for the people that are suffering from these cycles of whatever kind of lack of mental health or lack of self-awareness or toxicity or abuse or poor treatment of people that they care about around them. There are groups for them, but there are also groups for the family members. So, for those who are out there and are struggling and have a difficult relationship, just know it's got to go to people whose paid work it is to be in the middle and to be the one who can be the helper. When all we are is continuing to help and continuing to try and continuing to try, nothing's changing. We see the behavior repeating or worsening. We need safety. Mm-hmm. We need to recognize we are separate from the situation, and the compassionate choice has to become taking care of oneself. And as much as possible, communicating the other person. I think that professional help would be so good if you could just recognize, because denial and lack of awareness plays into a lot of bad cycles and a lot of bad patterns. People aren't necessarily willing to face the truth. The best you can do is to try to communicate it and say, I've observed, and if possible, something concise. Don't need a 20-page email, but, a paragraph, like, these are some things I've observed. I'm really worried about you and the people you care about, because this is harming. This is harming what's happening. And there are people that are paid and trained to help in these situations. And I really hope and long for that to be there for you. But me, I'm out.
Right.
And now I need a boundary. Now I need safety. So being compassionate does not mean surrendering our safety, our well-being, our welfare. Does not mean surrendering entirely to the other person. So we have to figure out when it's becoming abusive, when it's pervasive, when it's always negative, we need to get out. We need to find a way to get to safe harbor for ourselves and have others help care for us, because it's hard to always be empathetic and stay for a loved one and keep being diminished and keep being hurt. And there's grief and there's sadness and there's regret and there's loss in us when we've been the one trying to carry someone through compassion, carry them. But once we're enabling to the point where we're just staying, just allows the bad pattern to continue and it's not changing. We are not the paid professionals trained to deal with this. And if we are a paid professional trained to deal with this, we are not the right person in our own relationship. Even if you have that training, it gets biased. There's too much emotion. We should not have to be the therapy providers of our loved ones or the addiction and recovery support specialists, the counselors, the mental health professionals. We should not be providing the drugs, should not be prescribing them. Healthy self-care things. Try to say, you need a break, you need a bath, I'm going to make you tea, I'm going to bring you a meal. But if stuff keeps persisting, that there we have to be willing to eventually draw a line. And the compassion has to be to communicate as best we can and then create a very strong boundary and not allow any more interaction. So, it's the toughest thing in the world to break something off, but it is a compassionate stance. It is an option one can take. Is the best I can do is communicate what I've seen and communicate what steps might be helpful here, and then go. And then start the role of self-compassion, because I am also hurting. I am also suffering because this has been the situation for such a period of time, So then the compassion is more calling on the resources that we need to have others help us and have others help provide the care that might be necessary after we've been through such a difficult experience.
I hear that. And definitely, I've even been in the situation where I've allowed people to get away with a little bit too much, and to the point where we both know what's going on, and until I was able to, I spoke about this on a podcast the other day, until I was able to get out of that situation and get away from it and actually get some peace and quiet where I could actually hear my thoughts, I wasn't able to really realize how abusive it was and how much they were taking advantage of my kindness. And so thank God I'm not in that situation anymore. Thank God, I was able to get out of it, and now I'm able to see. But not a lot of people are, get that clarity. So hopefully if you're listening to this podcast and you've heard Juliet's story, you will be able to pull that and pull yourself out of that situation, so you're no longer being abused in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Compassion is 360 degrees, and we're degree 0, 1, and 360. I mean, it starts and ends with us. It's all around, every direction, including us. So it matters to have that space, a safe space to fully register what our own experience is and has been, and to honor that as much as we can honor other experiences, because there are people trying to help others. And they're paid and they're professional or non-involved situation. Let them help. But we have the right to safety. And we're not going to be able to do our best work and live our best life and be our best self and like serve our purpose in the world when we're being depleted and diminished by staying in things that are broken or dysfunctional. So we owe it to what we can offer others to get out and get resilient again, to get whole, to get well, to attend to our healing and our well-being. Because we all have gifts to offer, and it shouldn't all be going into this sort of black hole, this bottomless pit of need of some dominant relationship that keeps being draining. If we're always drained and depleted, we just can't fill up enough to offer what it is we're meant to offer. So we need that. We need safe havens. So as much as we can, make sure you're doing your own work of safety, security. That's the fundamentals. People need to be safe and stable and secure. And that's easier said than done, but whatever way is possible, or just like breaks, like getting space away. It can be a toxic work situation too. And if our income is tied to it, if our housing is tied to it, if the housing of the other beings, children and loved ones and pets and extended family is tied to this, it's very difficult. We can't just walk away in a hot second. Right. So I honor that it's complex, these situations, the lives that we're in, but we all deserve care, and we all deserve safe spaces to heal and to recover and be more resilient, to feel more resilient. If we feel constantly depleted, then something about our life situation is not working well for us. And you have to do reflection, is it a combination of things, or is it more one thing or two things that you can really identify? And then what are the possibilities? How can you get more space? With a job situation, is there a different group you can get assigned to, or the different tasks? Can you get more leave time? Can you go to part-time? How can you get hired by a better thing and get out of there? Because we can't change other people. We can help recognize more things, be a positive mirror, and help maybe their dawning self-awareness. But each of us makes our own decision to change. So ultimately we have to take responsibility for what we can take charge of, for what control we have, and use that in a positive way to address our well-being, our resilience, our safety, our security, however we can. So sometimes it gets down to just basic fundamentals. How can you get a few hours of space to just catch up and see how you're doing, see what you might need? Particularly if you're having to kind of keep going into a situation that's really draining.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that's going to be super helpful for anyone that's listening that may be going through that situation. Well, we talked about a lot, but I wanted to just before we get out of here, because like I said, I love your opinion and I love having you on the show. You're more than welcome to come back anytime to talk about anything, because I know that it'll help anyone that's listening. But just before we go, I wanted to kind of get any last thoughts on spiritual awakenings or compassion that you'd like to leave us with.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for those who've made it to the end with us, yay! Thanks for sticking around. We love people that watch the whole episode.
Yeah.
Gold stars to everybody who hears the whole episode. Got talking about some pretty difficult, heavy, stuff there, but I would rather leave things with more of a empowering up kind of feeling, and I think it's that my sense of the moment we're in is this sort of last gasp dying away of the power structures that have been existing over the past couple thousand years. And the return and the updating, the refreshing in a new way of new forms of shared, distributed means of running the world, control and power and authority. Those are even the words of the old paradigm that's dying away. And I don't know if I even have the words yet of the one that's being born right now. And it's not the first time it's ever born. These things seem very cyclical. So it'll probably all come and fall away, and we'll forget, and it'll repeat, and then we'll remember, and then we'll forget, and it'll repeat. But right now, we seem to be part of this tipping point time where more and more people are awakening and saying, it could be better, so why isn't it? Let's just make it better. What can we do? What can I do? And that's a spiritual awakening. When you just step out and like sort of shake off like what you've gone through and what's existing and what you see on the TV, or the internet, your phone, and just go, okay, so that's a crazy show. It's like everything turned into bad reality TV. And, like The Onion, which was a satire site, everything seems like an Onion article now. Like, what's the job of The Onion? They were just creating these scenarios, but now we're living them. So I don't even know what they do anymore. Now they have to write serious news articles because life became parody. Right. So put that over there and look at all the rest of the world. Look at what's around you in the environment. Like, just take a walk and take trees and some water and some animals and just notice all that, and take another one in your community and see all the people and all the things that are happening, all the things that people are going through, and just open up, because it's not just in these little devices and these little sound bites. Like, that is a distraction. They are trying to distract us from a massive grand awakening that's happening, a shift. And there are things like The Shift and the Shift Network and all of this stuff that's happening. There's a book by my friend and colleague Trish McGregor that she wrote with her husband Rob McGregor that's called The Shift, about the awakening. And her last chapter is about her vision for what's next. And she talks about interviewing me for Compassion Revolution as like the vision of what's next. She incorporated my vision into her vision, which was so cool to see in this book on The Shift, of like, this awakening is about compassion. It's about getting past just our ego self. We do have to be in a safe, secure spot. So we're balancing the need to not forget we have a self, because it needs cared for. But then if it's stable, if it's safe, if we can provide our fundamental needs for ourselves, then we can also merge. Then we can go beyond the self, but not in that harmful, staying in a negative, abusive place way, which almost staying in dominant paradigm of society is now abusive to all of the people still showing up. We still show up and it keeps harming us. So for me, I mostly opt out. I only try to figure out a little bit about what's going on out there, because it's kind of like opening a screaming Pandora's box, and it's like, rah! Okay, it's still insane. Closing the box, putting it away, locking the door, going down the hall, leaving the structure, going elsewhere. So it's like I keep like the tiniest box. I have many, many phone-free days and computer-free days, as many as I can design into my life, because that thing is keeping us prisoners. Not all there is. And what's out here is this expanding, this just huge expanding. And that expanding is a reawakening. And it's new and old because it's happened before, but now it can happen to us, for us, because of us, with us helping. And that's the awakening we need. We need to stay informed, but not addicted to all that information. There's now too much, and it's too negative. It's very biased, and it's designed to just keep you addicted and going back for more. To keep you thinking the end is nigh and it's in the next hour. Just keep on CNN and you will find out the news at 11. And you just stay glued to it. And it's like, because we're so afraid, and it just keeps us paralyzed in our fear response. Or in the agony, the empathy, the agony that we feel, paying attention to all these things that are suffering. When we're good people with big hearts, we can just stay stuck in that empathy, all that suffering. We have to find a way to build a safe boundary around it and minimize it, because there's other things happening. There's beauty happening. There's love being given. I've actually seen a few people now since COVID with their free hug sign back on, Mask or no mask, where it used to be, I would see a lot of people with the free hugs, and I'm like, that is the way. I just want to be able to walk out in the world with my eyes closed and just trust that I can just embrace what comes next, and it can embrace me and not harm me.
Right.
To come and to act with love and assuming the best. You have to be prepared and sensible. You can't, I wouldn't do it in a place where I know people like me are being harmed. I wouldn't go give free hugs on a war zone. I don't think. I respect people that try to do that kind of approach, but I am usually trying to balance like safety and a logical sense of concern for my own well-being with, and then, okay, if that's covered, how can I be out in the world in an open and loving way? How can I extend more kindness? Because compassion may seem to like out there, it doesn't feel like familiar, but kindness is enough.
Right.
Gentleness is enough. How can I go out in the world and be more gentle with myself and be gentle with others? How can I go gently with those that I love? Just take it easy. How can I just assume the best of myself and others? Whatever phrase makes you feel open and lighter and brings in energy, and like your eyes start to feel like they're seeing more colors, you're seeing more degrees around you, like whatever that is, find that phrase and use, I just want more peace. I just want more harmony. I just want more goodwill. It doesn't matter what the phrase is. The word doesn't matter. Again, it's not attachment to the one phrase. I'm finding ones that I can use to try to communicate what's in my heart, but it goes so far beyond language. The language doesn't matter. It's, what brings us alive and awake. What helps us remember there's more than what these tiny little devices are screaming at us? Because those are voices of madness that are fighting to try to maintain power and keep taking our money so they stay rich. Screw those voices and their wealth. I'm done with it. How can I barter? How can I exchange? How can I do a trade? How can I upcycle, recycle? I did like a whole year where I tried to buy no new product.
Wow.
Other than food, because you can't upcycle and recycle all your food. We can't actually exist on that. So other than like food or shampoo, and I still took all the shampoo and the soap and the toothpaste that I could from barters, and I got all these, it was during COVID too, groups doing like different exchanges, and we just meet up and like, what did you get that you're not using? And getting on all the buy nothing groups where people are doing community exchange through social media. There's like a buy nothing group for my town, Charlottesville, and then buy nothing group for my community outside of the city. And going to my Habitat for Humanity store, my SPCA has a thrift store. These support those groups. So Greenpeace and SPCA, they're trying to protect wildlife, trying to build housing, supporting those groups with, and not buying a whole bunch of new stuff we don't need. Can we make it? Can we remake it out of something we have? Can we just do a big old swap with all our friends? Like, how can we participate less in that crazy town show happening over there, screaming out of our devices, put them on mute, and then find the thing that gets you energized and excited, because it's there too. It's so easy to get lost in all the noise of all this drama and all these things that are terrible. There's also things that are wonderful. And if we live in the space that's wonderful, we are going to expand that space. We don't need to expand the space where it's terrible. They're doing a great job. What we can do is try to minimize that and its impact on our life and expand this space of awakening, whatever the awakening looks like, and just trying to increase safety and well-being and peace and life, decrease harm, decrease warfare, decrease violence, decrease escalation, decrease misunderstanding, decrease prejudice, increase understanding how much we can gain from one another, confronting the things that are obstacles to that inside ourselves, because we all drank the water. We all grew up in the society, and I've been traveling around the world and trying to do compassion work with other countries and other continents, and there's patterns and cycles and intergenerational heritage everywhere. We emerge from a long, long, long history. And it's like in the South African, the Ubuntu, and more than just South African, the Ubuntu and system, the spiritual practice and philosophy that emerges from Africa is that we are people. I am a person because of other persons. And being a person is not a guaranteed state. You can be just more like a beast, more like an animal. And the thing that just differentiates us to say that, no, this is a person. I can be a person. You are a person. We are people together, is that care and concern. The compassionate concern for ourselves and others is fundamental to that Ubuntu philosophy, that otherwise we shouldn't even deserve to be called the humans, that we're less than that when we're just caught up in this drama and doing harm. And that social aspect, we show up with our ancestors. When they say the greeting is, I see you. And it's not just I in the singular, it's often I in the plural, which is me and all of my ancestors. We see you and all of your ancestors. It's like myself and my ancestor tribe greet you with you and your ancestor tribe. And all these beings are coming together through this moment of just our connection. And how beautiful is that? And that's like Sawabona. We see you, we see all of you, and you see all of me. We come with this deep history, and we're going to have to do a lot of grace and reconciliation work and forgiveness of our own histories, of our ancestors and what they did, the harm they felt, the harm they perpetrated, like all of it. We all have both perpetrators and victims in our history. No one on this earth is of such pure lives that they're only one or the other. It's all mixed. We're all mixed now, but we also have to take responsibility, and so we can step into that. That's awakening, to say, I see you and I see all these people that helped. And you can see me and all these beings that help make me possible. And, I would not be possible without my cats and my dogs. I would not be possible without the trees outside my window right now. And, the soil and the sun and the water. I would not even be possible without that moment of my earliest memory, returning a leaf to its bush, like I could fix it. We're part of systems, not just human. So it's like, I want to see us as these great entities emerging from all of the life that has been, emerging from the mountains and the lands and the waters and the light and these systems, all these beings that we feed one another. We have these cycles where we need the water and we need the food of the plants, of the animals, but we can honor it. We can honor that we come from these webs. And so if we can see each other as these very complex webs, and nothing is purely this or that, nothing is just black or white, just good or evil, not even the ones I see doing harm. That's why I can have a lot of compassion for them. Now, I still want a safe distance. Compassion is not surrendering your own safety.
Right.
So important. But from a space of safety, I can extend compassion. I can feel empathy and compassion even for the ones doing wrong. And if we get to that state, we're going to stay polarized, unable to work past our differences. And so I hope whatever awakenings we have, that, if you see this to the end, yay for you. And go have an awakened day. Go after this podcast and do something that feels good to you. Go make that cup of tea. Go have a swim. Go put on a layer of clothing to be more comfortable. Go nestle up with something you love that loves you back. A book, a cat, a loved one. I don't care. Do something really good for yourself. And just notice, be open to all that's available to us. It's not just this screaming show out of our tiny boxes and devices. That is actually mostly a distraction. So what else? Be present to what else is here in our actual lived experiences, our lives, our communities, because there's so much beauty. The news is so biased and it's only reporting this tiny little sliver of what's really happening. And so all of us are powerful. All of us have the capacity to go out and just be more kind. And that's enough. That's a revolution. That's the compassion revolution. Just go out and be kind. And if you got to get safe and get away from some not safety, that's okay. That's a kindness too.
Right.
Get safe. Once you're safe, be kind. That I'll just leave everybody with that, just try to be open, notice the good, get the pause, find that pause, find some peace, find some space. And in that space, open up to compassion, open up to kindness and gentleness, open up to new possibilities. New things can happen. And it's up to us. We have to do it. We're the ones we were waiting for.
I love that. We are the ones we were waiting for.
Thank you. I feel super honored to have the Compassion Revolution on my podcast. So people are hearing it here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm like, yay.
Spitting
That
it out,
means I'm
spitting it
part
out.
as well. So thank you. I truly, 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 truly appreciate your message. I know it's going to resonate with a lot of listeners. It's resonating with me. I was able to even pull my own personal stories with everything that you stated. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I just love when you're here. You're amazing. But before we go, I know people. If you haven't listened to the first episode, please go listen to it now. It's amazing.
We talked
Just do
about
it
totally
now.
other stuff.
Totally other stuff. You get to know Juliet a little bit more. I would love for you guys to listen to that episode. It connects a lot with this one. But once again, if you want to leave for anyone that wants to follow you, wants to know more about you, any information, your website, all of that stuff, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I have to make sure that we got all the links in the notes in case people want to connect. So I love new professional connections on my LinkedIn page. So teaching compassion and conflict resolution and nonviolence and working with groups with mindfulness and, thinking about all these things relate. Just look up Juliet Trail on LinkedIn right there. And on social media, you can find me under Juliet Trail sometimes. And I also sometimes go, my husband and I have a band and we sing about all this stuff too. It's not enough to talk about it. We got to sing about it. And so our band is called Unheard Sirens Incorporated, Unheard Sirens Inc. So if you look up the Unheard Sirens, you can find our music videos and you can find our songs. And we're trying to turn all of this stuff that we are sparked up about and living our life about and sometimes pissed off about, but mostly hopeful and excited to lead change about into our music. So that's all on Unheard Sirens Inc. And it's everywhere there's music. We got the website and all the social media and all the, Google Play and Apple Play and Spotify and YouTube, all of the things. So look up Unheard Sirens Inc. And Siren 319 is my moniker some places. So if you're trying to connect to me on some of the social sites, you can also check Siren 319 rather than just Juliet Trail. So some places I'm one, some places I'm another.
And we'll leave all of the followings in the descriptions in the show notes.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to follow, you can directly from this video.
Please feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
getting
you
connected.
again.
That's how we're going to do this stuff on a bigger level.
Yeah.
We need to all be connected so we can
Exactly.
support each other. So yeah,
That's
let me know who you
main
are,
goal.
and we want to support you too.
Right. Yeah, that's my main goal. Let's get connected. Let's try to bring people to Juliet. Let's try to bring people together. Eventually, I would love to have a speaker series. Juliet, I would love for you to be one of the speakers.
Yeah.
I'm starting to throw it out there so that it can become something that's tangible. We actually get, a venue and something going on. But yeah, it's all these ideas. I swear, they're just coming to me, and with you next to me, I'm like firing off on all cylinders. So
Let's do it. I love Southern California. I'm always looking for excuses to little Southern California stage and put a little, put some compassion talks or something together.
I would love that. Thank you. I appreciate you again for telling your story, for giving us some insights, for helping the audience. I know it's going to go deep for a lot of people listening. And once again, if you guys want to follow Juliet, please, within the show notes, go ahead and do that. But thank you, Juliet, again. I appreciate you. Until next time.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you, Devon. Thank you for having me back on.
No problem. Bye, y'all.
Today's episode comes to you thanks to our sponsor, Kangen Water. Electrolytes reduced water is the power of true hydration, manifested in the most advanced Japanese technology that has been in the market for more than 50 years. To drink the best water, shower with a hot spring quality water, and start a new business with the most amazing and profitable compensation plan in the world, visit thelivingwatercouple.com to learn more or get started today.